Hey Donnie, give me a countdown because I wanna say the first line in the episode, and then you go.
Okay.
Previously on X-Men.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Yep, that's right. Previously on X-Men, welcome back to another episode of the Fat Minute, doing part two of X-Men rankings. So if you didn't tune into last week's episode, for part one we ranked the OG trilogy, X-Men, X2, and X-Men: The Last Stand. And so far, for the most part, we're all like pretty much on the same page. We all put X2 at an A, X-Men at a B. The only difference is whereas Mike and I put The Last Stand at a D, Blake gave it a C. That's the only moment of someone going rogue so far. So if you enjoyed that episode, welcome back because now tonight, part two, we are ranking the First Class Quadrilogy. That is, of course, X-Men First Class, Days of Future Past, Apocalypse, and Dank, I mean Dark Phoenix. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. So let's go ahead and let's jump into it. I'll start us off. We'll start this episode off with, of course, X-Men First Class. And I think the first thing that's important to note about this movie is just how much was riding on this movie. Um, because this came out in 2011. This was like 2 years after X-Men Origins Wolverine, 5 years after X-Men The Last Stand. Two movies that were not well received at all. So it really like didn't look good for this franchise at the time, and it was just kind of meandering around, didn't know where it was going. And so there was a lot riding on this movie. Like I feel like if this movie didn't do as well as it did, this franchise probably would not have continued, at least in the way that we know it. Um, and just out of the gate, I gotta say, like this was only this. I watched this movie last week or like a few days ago to prepare for this episode. It was only the second time I ever saw it, and the first time I saw it with you guys. We were at a friend's house, and I wasn't really able to give it like my full undivided attention. So I just kind of walked away with it like, yeah, it was okay, I guess. But this time, like being able to watch it on my own and just really sit and focus on it, man, I really did not like respect this movie enough the first time around. Second viewing, being able to really just focus entirely on it, I love this movie. First Class, I think it's great. I think it really breathes a lot of new life into the series. Sometimes when things just get too messy, like this franchise had done with the last two movies, sometimes you just got to go back to basics, and I think this movie does that very well. I think it's great seeing how Professor X and Magneto first like meet and come together. Like it does everything that a prequel should do. It manages to, go back, show you the untold story of how everything began, but it doesn't really commit a lot of the sins that other prequels do. Um, I think Kevin Bacon as Sebastian Shaw is awesome. Like he is just an awesome villain in this movie. Um, I think just like pretty much everything. Like James McAvoy as Professor X, great. Michael Fassbender as Magneto, great. I love that. I mean, you mentioned the last episode, Blake, about how that opening scene from the first movie with Magneto as a kid in the concentration camp was so great that they recreated it for this movie. They didn't just recreate it; they expanded on it because then they show what happens after that, and it's just so good. And I love seeing Magneto's like journey as a character, and that scene when he kills Sebastian Shaw at the end. Like I love that shot of the back and forth between Professor X and Sebastian Shaw as Magneto is killing him.
Yeah.
Just it's
That's
oh my
amazing.
yeah, like and just there I have nothing bad to say about this movie. Like it is great. I mean, the only critiques I can make about this movie, I'll wait until we get to the next one because the critiques I can make about this movie don't really so much apply to this movie. They more so apply to what came after, and I'll expand on that later. But this movie, I love it. It's an A easily for me. Go ahead, Mike.
So just to give a little background here, I remember when this movie was announced and before it came out and stuff. I don't know, just reading about it, like I did not think this movie was going to be good. Like I thought this movie was going to suck so bad.
I agree. It like those initial like pre-release like talk, it did not inspire confidence.
Yeah, and like I wasn't like impressed with like the pictures
Hmm.
and stuff like that. And I at first when I heard about it, I was kind of annoyed that well, at first I was excited that they were going back to the 60s because I mean that's when the comic originally came out. But
Hmm.
then when I found out that we weren't going to have like Cyclops and like a bunch of the OG X-Men, like really the only OG X-Men on the like the team was like Beast.
Right.
So I don't know, that just really like irked me. I was I don't know if you could tell from the last video, like I was on a Cyclops rant and I'm just like, I just want my boy to get some justice. And like so they're like, oh, well, we're going back before he was born or whatever, and I'm just like, God damn it.
You get
It's
it.
like
You get his older brother
I was
though.
yeah, it's like um it was like we finally get a movie that doesn't focus on Wolverine, and they don't. It's like they don't have Cyclops, and that was literally my reaction. I was just like, God damn it! But
I love
anyways,
it.
I
I love it.
digress. I digress. But no, I saw when the trailer first came out, I'm like, okay, all right, that's decent trailer. And then I remember when I saw it in theaters, it it blew me away. Like my low expectations, like I think in some ways helped.
They always
Um,
do, yeah.
yeah, they do. Like I feel like it has a bigger impression on you. But yeah, just this like Matthew Vaughn's like directing is so superb in this movie. Um, I'm like in hindsight, I wish he would have continued with this series and wouldn't have left to do
Yeah.
Kingsman.
Yeah.
I really wish he was because I guess semi spoiler for my opinions on the other movies, they get worse as they go along. But I mean that in a nice way for the next two, not the last one. But I still like the next two, but like they get worse as they go along. But no, just yeah, James McAvoy was he's great as Professor X. He has that kind of he's not the stereotypical Professor X where he's the British dude who's super serious and super smart and has the answer for everything. I
he's
like that
he's
they show that.
he's a bit of a frat
Oh, go
boy.
ahead. Yeah, like they show like his younger side, like oh, Professor X used to party and stuff. Like
Right.
they show him like doing a beer bong and stuff. And I love
Hmm.
that. And he's like using scientific terms to try to like pick up chicks.
Right.
Yeah, I really like that kind of like humanizing side of Charles. And I gotta throw out too like Kevin Bacon as Sebastian Shaw. Like I fucking love Kevin Bacon.
Hmm.
And usually he has played a villain before, but like I feel like a lot of people never talk about like his villain roles. Cause and don't get me wrong, I love him as a hero. Like I fucking love Tremors and shit like that. But like he's so good at playing a villain. He was a villain in another movie. He was in a movie I really like called Sleepers.
Hmm.
And he's just you just want to like curb stomp him and then piss on him. Like he's just so good at being bad. And like that carries over into this movie. Like you was saying how the extended opening scene, like that scene where like he's like trying to force Magneto to use his powers and if he
Yeah.
doesn't do it right, like he just fucking kills
Um.
his mom right in
Yeah.
front of him.
That
And when
that
he killed
scene that scene
yeah.
when he's in the office, like I remember watching that, and like at first you just see like the camera's on Magneto and it's on Sebastian Shaw, and it just looks like a normal office, and then you see like the other side of the office and you see the surgical table and the tools, like that
Yeah, and you're
shit
just like,
hit.
"Oh."
Yeah, that shit hits hard.
Yeah, and no, and like when he kills Magneto's mom and Magneto, you just see like that bell crunch.
Hmm.
He, like he has like no remorse. He's just like, "Ah, wunderbar."
Hmm.
And just like, and he just eats it up. Like when Magneto screams and makes all the metal fly around, he's just laughing and giggling. Like, nah, he's great. Um, um, and this movie surprised me too, because like I didn't think this movie was gonna be like a crazy action film, but like the action scenes for what are in this movie are really good. Like I feel like the third act is really like enthralling.
Yeah.
One of the characters I really liked, he doesn't have a lot of lines, but I really liked Azazel, like Nightcrawler's dad.
Red Nightcrawler.
Or, yeah, and he's so cool. Like when he's like teleporting around and like using the swords and cutting people up.
Hmm.
That was legit cool. Um, and we got introduced to Jennifer Lawrence's Mystique, and I feel like this movie and Days of Future Past is probably her best. Well, we'll
I
get into
think
that later.
I think introducing her, like showing like having introducing that story of Mystique and Professor X was a really interesting choice.
Yeah, I like that they kind of like, humanized her, because in the previous movie she's just kind of like almost just like a weapon or a tool for Magneto to use.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Um, in more ways than one, am I right? Mhm.
Oh,
I prefer the real Raven,
perfection.
but uh, speaking of him, no, okay, Michael fucking Fassbender, the guy, like his performance as Magneto is Oscar worthy, and I don't say that lightly. I don't throw that word around, but like he's just so goddamn perfect in this movie.
Hmm.
Like, and that's why I say, like, I have the utmost respect for Ian McKellen. I love that dude. But to me, his performance as Gandalf will always outshine his performance as Magneto.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of those things. Like when you see it, when you associate a certain actor with a character, like Christopher Reeve is Superman, Bruce Willis is John McClane. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Like Ian McKellen is Gandalf. It's
Right.
not Ian McKellen is Magneto. No,
Right.
Michael Fassbender is Magneto.
Like I love that
Like,
line in the beginning where he's just like, I guess I'm Frankenstein's monster and I'm just looking for my creator.
Yeah.
yeah, and that whole scene is just beautiful. Where like he just
Hmm.
pretends to be a dude like coming to get a drink, and like he just and they slowly piece together like who he is. I
Hmm.
love, and they're like, oh, because he asked them about their families. They're like, oh yeah, my dad was a butcher or whatever. Oh, my dad was a tailor. They're like, um, what was your family's heritage or whatever or last name? And he's like, oh, they didn't have one. They were taken from them by butchers and tailors. And he's like,
Hmm.
he's like, clinging the glasses together, like, oh, slowly piecing it, and he just
And then
kills them
and
all.
then they see the tattoo on his arm.
Yeah, they see like his number, and like he's so moving in that movie, and just at the end of like when he fucking kills Sebastian Shaw, and the thing is too, it's not even about the morality or like the whole like ongoing theme of X-Men with like humans and mutants and stuff like that.
Hmm.
He even agrees with Sebastian Shaw. He says that to him. He's like, I want you to know that I agree with everything you said, but unfortunately, you killed my mother.
Hmm.
And he just slowly fucking pushes that coin through his head, the coin that he gave him,
Hmm.
and it's beautiful. Like, and that whole and that by that movie, I am rooting for Magneto the whole fucking time. And I get where Charles said, and he's just like, oh, they're men just following orders, and he just says he's like, I've been at the mercy of men just following orders,
Right.
never again.
Right.
And it's beautiful too. And the thing is too, like Magneto also saves them because those fuckers are gonna blow them up.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fucking Americans and Soviets. He was right. He's like Americans, Soviets. He's like they won't see the difference.
Right.
He's like they'll fear us, and that fear will turn to hatred. It's like he was right and Charles was wrong. Charles thought like if we stop the Cuban Missile Crisis, like they'll like us, and they didn't.
Nope.
And yeah, and just that's what that. that's what makes Magneto so compelling, is just that
He's got a
he's
point.
not he's not well, the thing is, it's like in real life, like the people that we see as, like, dictators or tyrants, or the real villains of real life, on their side of the story, they're a hero to people, like their
Hmm.
followers and stuff like that. There's
Hmm.
always another side of the story. There's always different circumstances, and you don't really get that, I feel like, in a lot of stories. And I also feel like you kind of get that with Ian McKellen's, but not enough.
Right.
He's very much still like the mustache twirling villain,
Mhm.
because we have just such that huge time jump from like World War II to like the present day in the old movies.
Hmm.
But in this movie, you see like that he is a caring person. He is a passionate person. He does care about people. He does care about mutant kind. He's just trying to survive and make sure his people are safe. And yeah, it's just great. I think the whole cast is great. There's some characters I wish that would have returned, but no, this movie is an A+ to me. Like, to this day, this is still the best X-Men movie. But yeah.
All right, Blake, go ahead.
Well, I don't want to keep you in suspense, so I'm going to get the rating out of the way. It's an A. This is the best X-Men movie. It completely blew the original trilogy away. Um, yeah, I mean, and I guess not to spoil or do a fast forward on how I feel about the rest of the movies, all but the very last one, but I'll take the First Class trilogy. And the reason why I say that is because, again, I'm excluding Dark Phoenix, but I'll take the First Class trilogy over the original trilogy
Yeah.
any day. Like,
Yeah.
if you were to tell me, oh, hey, I want a marathon, 1, 2, or 3, or First Class, Days of Future Past, and Apocalypse, I'm like, I'll do the First Class movies like any day, any week.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I mean, just to take it back is like, yeah, the very first pictures in like Entertainment Weekly or whatever, like they weren't good,
No.
and I don't know if it was just like the photographer, the lighting of the picture, or like the angle. Like the first time we saw Michael Fassbender as Magneto, like in that yellow jumpsuit with his helmet on,
Look
his
dookie.
helmet looked his helmet looked too big. Like it looked weird. Like it was a very weird
It
angle.
almost looks like it's like photoshopped onto his face.
Hmm.
Yeah, like there was just something wrong. But then like Entertainment Weekly the year later did a bad job with the first pictures of the Avengers. So like I think it's like, hey Marvel, if you want to announce or if you want to do your first promotional pictures, don't send them to Entertainment Weekly.
Yeah.
But
Well, I also think like too, like post production's a hell of a thing, and I don't think post production was done when those pictures came out.
and what a lot of people don't realize is that's why a lot of Comic-Con trailers aren't released to the public because they just look different on in Hall H on that big screen. But
Hmm.
then because a lot of them actually the visual effects aren't like 100% finished. So if you were to release them online, a lot of people would be like, "Ew, that could look a little bit better." And it's like, well, to be fair, the movie has 10 more months.
Right.
Um, but anyway, so yeah, like it's just the pictures were kind of underwhelming. And then the first like trailer or two was okay. I was like, okay, all right, I can maybe work with this. But the very last trailer, the final trailer that like really went into it and like, you know, um, them showing like the Russians have sent warheads to Cuba, and then it's doing JFK talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it's like this actually looks really cool
Yeah.
and they're inserting the X-Men into American history. They're doing a Watchmen, but it's going to be PG-13, obviously. And I showed it to my family, and my family didn't give a shit about the X. Well, my parents didn't give a shit about the X-Men, and then my sister and brother-in-law like the original trilogy, but they would have had no expectations for First Class. I showed them that final trailer that really goes into the Cuban Missile Crisis subplot, and they're like, "This actually looks really good." Um, and yeah, and it does a good job at explaining like because in the original shows he's like, oh yeah, Charles and Eric, they were friends, and it's like you don't really see any evidence of why they would have been friends like through Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen, but in this it does a really good job at explaining why they were friends.
Hmm.
Like it has so many good moments, and a moment that I want to bring up is Charles helps Eric access his favorite memory of like him blowing out his birthday candles with his mom, which
They
is a
weren't birthday
very
It
candles.
was
It was
oh
it
Hanukkah.
was Hanukkah.
oh my bad I'm sorry I didn't get to rewatch it, so I'm working on like 90% memory. But anyway, it was Hanukkah, which I guess that's more fitting. It makes more sense for the context of the story. But still, it was his favorite memory, and it's a very beautiful moment that like his best friend helped him remember that.
Remember that he even still had that memory.
Yeah, yeah, and it shows that like Magneto wasn't always an asshole, and like he was like he tried to be a nice guy, especially to mutants. He wasn't just like very self-centered. Like he prefers quote the real Raven. And another great moment is he tries to genuinely, sincerely compliment Beast,
Yeah.
and Beast is an asshole to him,
Yeah.
and he's like, don't mock me, and Magneto's like, I wasn't. Like I thought that was a very underrated moment. Um, and but yeah, I mean, when he gets his revenge, it is so satisfying because, of course, Charles is once again on his like, no, we have to be the better man, and I'm like, a trigger for me in a movie is when the mom dies. Like, I don't like that shit. Like, I mean, it's effective, it works, like it's supposed to get you emotionally invested, but I'm just like, yo, Magneto, you better not fucking bitch out of this. And finally he's like,
Oh
you
man,
killed my
fuck
mother.
Charles.
Yeah. He's like, you killed my mother. And I'm like, that's right. Kill his ass. It's like, I was just not having it. Like, it is a very satisfying moment. Um, as far as like the rest of the movie is great too. I mean, like, obviously, my biggest compliments go to Michael Fassbender as Magneto. Um, but yeah, and it takes, this is a good example of a comic book movie taking liberties. If you're going to change stuff, if you're going to do different stuff, make it work well, make it work in its own way, and
Hmm.
make it interesting. Like them making Mystique Charles Xavier's foster sister. Like, obviously, that would piss off, like, hardcore comic book fans of the classic issues. But it's like, movies are movies and books are books. And sometimes they just got to try to do something new for the sake of a movie. And this is a good example of it working. So yeah, not to drag it on. I think it's the best X-Men movie. I think it's probably not just one of the best prequels ever. It's one of the few good prequels. Like I think usually prequels don't really work that well.
Hmm.
Um, but I think it works here. Mainly because like at the time we weren't 100% sure it was a prequel. It was kind of like,
Which is, I'm going to get to that when we talk about the next movie.
yeah, which is kind of like, it's kind of like Casino Royale in a way. They were doing a Casino Royale where it was just like a revamp in its own right. Um, but yeah, and it is a shame that Matthew Vaughn never returned, as opposed to just making like Kingsman spinoffs that I will probably never bother seeing because I don't give a shit.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, no, that's why I leave it. It's an A.
I do love that one scene when when Magneto and Charles capture Emma Frost, and like Charles looks into her mind to find out what Sebastian Shaw's plan is. It just shows him putting like those missiles on the map of the world and everything. Like it's absolutely fitting for the tone of this movie and the
Yeah.
style of this movie, but goddamn, it looked like a Hanna-Barbera skit. Like it was so goofy to me, and I'm not knocking any points off for it. It just looks so goofy to me. Like if you remove it out of that context.
I would say there are, yeah, but yes, I agree, and it does fit the 1960s. In a way, this movie is kind of like, what if Christopher Nolan made Austin Powers?
what what a summarization.
Good
Which
night.
is funny because Nolan is a huge Bond fan,
Oh
and
yeah,
the James Bond movies were like a big inspiration for the Dark Knight movies.
I
yeah.
can see it.
Well, I mean, like when Magneto kills those guys, like he's totally got that classic Sean Connery.
He's got that classic what you broke up. Blake,
Yeah,
you broke up. He's got that classic what?
Sean Connery drip
Why are you shouting?
because you can't hear me.
Oh, your internet sucks. I'm sorry. You're the only one breaking up, buddy.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right.
Good.
All right, well, After that little outburst, we'll move on to the next movie, X-Men: Days of Future Past.
You brought it on yourself.
Fuck you, eat my butt.
Oh, that didn't break up though.
Nothing
Are we
breaks
gonna
the
do
fight.
this? You want to start? I'll start. Days of Future Past. So, I remember when this movie got announced, everybody blew the hell up for multiple reasons. Bryan Singer was coming back. It was connecting the OG cast to the First Class cast. And it was an adaptation of probably the most popular X-Men comic story. Me personally, I'm not too big on the Days of Future Past story. I think it's fine. I think a lot of people like overestimate the scale of that story because it was only 2 issues. It was only 2 issues and it was just like done. And I mean, there's been stories that have gone back to that timeline here and there, but the original story was just 2 issues. And just me personally, it just kind of feels slightly derivative of a lot of other things. Like, oh wow, a dystopian future where all the characters you know and love are either dead or really bitter. Fucking dare to dream. Um, but I get it. It's a popular story, and they're an adaptation of it. It's popular. I get it. And I remember walking out of this movie not. I didn't hate it. I didn't dislike it, but I remember not loving it as much as other people did. And I remember we waited a whole year for the Rogue cut, which that's a sin in of itself because they made you wait a whole year for an alternate cut of a movie that isn't really that different and in some ways is worse in my opinion. Um, but as far as the theatrical cut, which is the only cut that's on Disney Plus, funny enough, um, and I rewatched this one too, leading up to this episode, and it's a bit of a mixed bag for me. I'm still kind of struggling on where I want to grade this one because, I was talking earlier with First Class, some of the critiques I would have of First Class, I can't put on that movie necessarily because they don't really become problems until this movie. Because Blake, like you mentioned, this movie, First Class, wasn't really supposed to be a prequel. Even at the time of release, it was supposed to be a reboot. Um, but after it did well, they decided to connect it to the OG movies with this movie. And the problem with that is, like, they tried to make First Class a reboot, but at the same time, they had stuff to connect it to the original trilogy. Like, they kept Mystique, her design exactly the same. They had the Hugh Jackman logo as Wolverine. They were like, oh, here's why Mystique joins Magneto. Like, there's a lot of stuff connecting it to the OG trilogy. It's like, is it supposed to be a reboot or is it a prequel? Make up your mind, guys. And because of that, there's moments with Days of Future Past that just there's some blanks in the movie, and I feel like it's because they didn't lean in on First Class being a prequel 100%, and also slightly because of laziness. Like, and a couple of them I would be willing to forgive if they were the only ones. Like, for example, Days of Future Past is set up with the post-credit scene of the Wolverine, and in the Wolverine, he loses his metal claws. So he only has the bone claws, but for some reason he has metal claws again in Days of Future Past. And for some reason, Kitty Pryde has a power that she didn't have in the previous movies. Okay, like, I'd be willing to forgive those 2 things if those were the only things, but then there's like the biggest one is like somehow Professor X is alive and back in his like normal body. What? Just because. And it might sound like nitpicking, but when one, like in the case of Professor X being back, when the entire foundation of the movie is basically built on that, and then with the other things, when there's just so many of them, it just starts to get kind of annoying, and it just starts to feel lazy. And Blake and I were discussing this movie over Facebook Messenger a couple days ago, and I noticed that, like, with this movie, it really makes you discuss the hypotheticals way more than stuff that happens in the actual movie. Like, the U.S. government is the most inconsistent villain I've ever seen in this movie because,
That's real life too.
I mean, you're not wrong, I guess, but but like in this movie, when Bolivar Trask is trying to pitch the Sentinel program to the to Congress, and they're just like, no. They're just like, if mutants are here, like you say, they're existing peacefully. We don't even know if like the Cuban Missile Crisis thing was actually mutants or whatever. It's like you were fucking willing to blow up a whole beach because you thought it was mutants. Like, what's this whatever attitude? And then they're also talking about like if they're here, they're existing peacefully, but they have Magneto locked up because he is accused of killing JFK. You now later Magneto says, I wasn't trying to kill him, I was trying to save him because he was one of our own. Assuming that's true, it's just like there's still a problem with the government. Like, do you guys want to like? Are you guys afraid of mutants or not? Like, do you want to rid the world of them or not? Because like even because then it raises the question of was the government in on the assassination, and then they tried to like blame it on Magneto. It's like, well, if that's the case, why didn't they hold Magneto up as like a patsy and be like, see, we told you mutants are dangerous? Like, I don't want the government to win in this movie, not just because they're the villains, but because I don't feel like they want it enough to deserve a victory. And it's just kind of annoying. Um, and that being said, though, there are a lot of good things in this movie. There's even a lot of beautiful moments in this movie. Um, and there's just like I think it was cool that they managed to connect the young cast to the OG cast. Um, and I think I do like Peter Dinklage as Bolivar Trask, and I love how they made Bolivar Trask. Like they added enough nuance to him to keep him from being a copy of William Stryker from X2. Because with William Stryker, like he just flat out hates mutants, but Bolivar Trask is like, I don't hate them. If anything, I admire them, but I also don't want my people to go extinct. So it's enough of a nuance to make him a very separate entity. And I love Mystique's story in this movie about how she's broken off from Magneto and she's doing her own thing. And when that scene when she, breaks into Trask's files and sees like he killed and did autopsies on like the crew that Magneto and her left with in First Class, and she just like freaks out. That's a great scene. Like I said, there are a lot of great moments in this movie, but there's just a lot of moments that are just kind of like one, there's a lot of blanks to the point that it makes you feel like, are you leaving things open to interpretation, or are you expecting me as the viewer to basically write the movie for you? And probably the thing that really drags this movie down the most is the final conflict on the White House lawn, because there isn't really a conflict, or at least not much of one. I mean, Wolverine gets yeeted out of the area like unceremoniously. And then, Beast gets trapped in a car for like 5 minutes, and then Professor X gets trapped under some rubble, and then Raven shoots Magneto, and that's it. Now, I mean, again, speaking of beautiful moments in this movie, I love that moment when Charles is just like, when he's talking to Raven and trying to convince her to not shoot Trask and, send them down this path towards this dark future. He's like, I've spent my whole life trying to control you, and look where it's gotten us, so I'm leaving it in your hands because I trust you. That's a great moment. But just that whole fun, and also, I mean, I didn't notice this until you brought it up, Blake, about how the final conflict in this movie is pretty much a copy paste of the final moment in First Class.
Yeah.
So, you deserve full credit for bringing that up, because I totally didn't notice it until you did. This movie, it's still difficult for me to grade it. It's somewhere between a B and a C for me. But when I really sit down and think about it and look at the flaws in it, especially those plot holes and those blanks, and just how it kind of just goes, fuck it, we're just going to go from point A from point B, deal with it. I got to give it a C, because when I think about that stuff, I got to think about how if any other movie did stuff like that, especially if a DC movie did something like that, we never would have heard the end of it. So I got to give Days of Future Past a C. And another thing, like, I love the ending to this movie. Like, I think this probably has the best ending, or at least one of the best endings out of the whole franchise. Like, Logan waking up and, like, the future's all bright and, like, they're all at school and everything. I just love that ending. But it also, like, because I don't like that the future team is a lot of new characters like Bishop and Blank and Sunspot and all that. I don't like that it's mostly new characters. And I get that they had to kill all, like keep the OG crew out to like sell like, hey, a lot of them are dead because of the Sentinels in the future and everything. But like, I don't know. When you have these brand new characters, I just don't have the emotional investment in them because I've never seen them before. And then at the end, like, where are these characters? It's the ending is a little too open ended because it's like, where's Magneto? Where's Mystique? Where's Blank and Sunspot and all the other guys? What happened to them? Um, I don't know. Like, and I wish, like Mike, you were talking about how we really needed Cyclops in First Class, or you really wanted Cyclops in First Class. I wanted Cyclops in this one. I feel like Cyclops should have been like one of the future members of the team fighting the Sentinels, especially since Halle Berry's role got severely cut down because she was pregnant at the time. It's like, why not just put Cyclops in there? Like, a little bit of
I
moment to
guess
redeem him from 2 and 3 for being benched
I,
the whole movie.
I guess because at the time they were still counting The Last Stand as canon, yeah, I guess,
Oh yeah, that's
and
true.
was still implying he was dead.
That's true. That's
Because
100%
because
true.
when when Wolverine sees Scott in the future, he acts surprised. I guess
That's
like
right.
thinking he was still dead.
Yeah, that's right. I'm dumb. I'm sorry. But
No,
But no, I was so glad when they brought it back. I was like,
yeah,
yay!
and no, like Days of Future Past, there's a lot of good moments. There's a lot of like even beautiful moments in this movie, but there's a lot of moments that I'm just like, what? So yeah, I gotta sit Days of Future Past at a C. Go ahead, Mike.
Um, so with this movie, with Love in First Class, when this movie was announced, like I was so fucking pumped. And I remember finding out like because originally Matthew Vaughn was gonna direct this,
Mm-hmm.
and then he dropped out, and that was when Bryan Singer was like, "Well, okay, I'll come back." So at the time, like I was like, "Okay, well, Matthew Vaughn dropped out, but hey, at least Bryan Singer's coming back." But in hindsight, I would have rather Matthew Vaughn stick through it all.
Yeah.
But anyways, so um, Days of Future Past, yeah, I still think this is a good movie. Like it's it could have been a great movie, but I think it's good. I think it achieved what um it was going for, and
Mm-hmm.
I give it a lot of credit for that. Like I feel like even though First Class is an amazing movie and in my opinion the best X-Men movie, I feel like it did well, but like people were still like kind of like on the downside of X-Men.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this movie like really kind of brought the X-Men franchise back. Because
Mm-hmm.
people will always love Wolverine no matter what. But like I feel like X-Men at the cinematic level, like people didn't care as much. It was I kind of see it as like not as movie quality wise, but like audience response. Like
Mm-hmm.
kind of like Batman Begins and The Dark Knight.
Yeah.
Like Batman Begins was great, but I don't think it garnered the attention that people wanted it to because they were still kind of recovering from like the poor reception of Batman and Robin. But then The Dark Knight, it was like, oh well, Batman's everywhere.
Right. Right.
I feel like when Days of Future Past came out, it was like, oh, X-Men's everywhere again. Um, but yeah, but I will say this thing, I was kind of nervous about like Wolverine being in the limelight again.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, oh, I was like, this is gonna be a fucking Wolverine movie all over again. Because like a big thing like in the Days of Future Past comic is like the Kitty Pryde goes back in time,
Mm-hmm.
but they reversed it. They have Kitty Pryde like send Wolverine back, which I think in the context of the story makes sense because Wolverine's an immortal, and he's been around for so long, like
Right.
he can just hop back into his old body.
Right. And it's also like they say, like, your mind, a person's mind can only go so far back before it snaps. And Wolverine's just like, well, what about someone's mind who just pieces itself back together?
Yeah, like someone who can heal and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, like, when they go back into the past, Wolverine does not overshadow everybody.
Right.
Like, this movie is very much a movie about Charles and Mystique. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they are very much like the focal points of these movies. And I think one of the best scenes in the movie is where young Charles like goes kind of through Wolverine's mind from like past to the future, and he
Hmm.
talks to old Charles, and like you get to see James McAvoy and Patrick Stewart like act together,
Yeah,
and yeah, and like when he tells him like how we need you to hope again, like
yeah.
I thought that was a really great scene. Um, um, well, what else? Sorry, I'm
I just love
kind of
before
blank.
that too. James McAvoy, as he's seeing Wolverine's future, he's just like, "Oh God, you poor, poor man."
Yeah, like yeah, his reaction is great. I think James McAvoy is even better in this one than he was in the first one.
I agree, and I think James McAvoy and Patrick Stewart both share, like, at least as far as their portrayals of Charles Xavier goes, they both like have this ability with, at least with that character, to like put so much feeling and everything, and like all the feeling you need into just like one sentence. Like James McAvoy with "Oh God, you poor man," and then later in the same movie, Patrick Stewart when Wolverine starts drowning, and Patrick Stewart just goes, "Oh dear God, no."
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I feel like this movie, like I could start seeing, like okay, I can see like James McAvoy becoming like Patrick Stewart,
Hmm.
and because like Patrick Stewart, like he very much is like Professor X. Like I feel like he's just like Professor X, like ripped right from the comic.
Hmm.
But like James McAvoy is the guy before that, and he feels like his arc is like going to that. Like first he's kind of like this wide-eyed, fun-loving, like kind of individual. Like
Hmm.
he's like, oh, it's like he's learning about mutants and he's excited, and he's doing all these discoveries and he's bringing them together. But then this movie, I feel like, kind of brings him to his lowest point, and we really see this kind of dark side to Charles, this dark, depressed side. It's very much like an analogy of like a drug addict,
Oh yeah, like
like
he
him
right.
using that.
Yeah, the right before he shoots up, he's like licking his lips and everything like a heroin addict.
Yeah, like he's like addicted to walking, but like it also takes his powers away. And it's kind of
Hmm.
like a mutant's powers is also sort of kind of like their identity, like kind of like when a drug addict kind of like loses their life to addiction and stuff like that.
Hmm.
I thought that was actually done really well because I remember seeing stills for this movie with like Charles walking. I'm like, why the fuck is he walking?
Right.
I was like, I thought maybe like with the time travel they like changed it and like he didn't get shot. It's like, oh, well, maybe he gets paralyzed later. I'm like, what the fuck's going on? Yeah, and also like in the stills, like Beast was normal again.
Yeah.
Because I was like, oh, this is a time travel movie. Maybe like the timeline got skewed and like Beast is still human looking and like Charles is still walking. But now they answer that with the whole serum thing. But yeah, one that like is the the uh the praise I gave for Magneto. I feel like and it gets worse as it goes on, but like I feel like with Magneto in this movie, they started off strong, but
Hmm.
then it kind of falters.
Like in the
Because
First Class Quadrilogy, Michael Fassbender as Magneto is kind of like Angry Beavers, where he's just like, Baron once was bad, then good, now bad again, Beaver.
yeah, and like the thing is, I think this movie should have taken advantage more of the time travel thing
Hmm.
and like kind of changed it up a little more because it's like, all right, well, we've seen bad Magneto.
Hmm.
this this movie, like the old movie was in the 60s. Now this is in the 70s. We've already established that Magneto has been a bad guy, and then he was arrested and he's put in that hidden prison, like underneath, like uh was it underneath the Pentagon?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, underneath the Pentagon. And I think when they broke him out, and speaking of that, like Evan Peters, like as Quicksilver was fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Like he's so good in them, and like the time in the bottle scene when like he saves them all and like runs around in super speed, like it's just great. And I remember seeing pictures of like Evan Peters with like his silver hair and like his silver jacket and his goggles. I'm like, it's like God, that looks like shit. But yet again, it was like just the pictures. It's like,
Right.
but yeah, like he's so good in a movie. Like he's one of like he's one of the like most memorable characters of these movies. And like it's like who gave a fuck about Quicksilver? before
Nobody.
this.
Nobody.
It's like he's like the discount, because in the comics he's just kind of like a discount bad guy Flash, and
Hmm.
these movies he's never even a villain. Like they just make him an X-Men, and like he's like the comic relief, and he's so fucking funny. And like Evan
Yeah.
Peters is a great actor.
He's another good example of they made a change and it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, like, Quicksilver has been good, but, like, normally he starts off as, like, a Brotherhood member, and then, like, he joins the Avengers, which is basically what they did in the MCU movie, but the MCU Quicksilver is very much inferior to this one.
I will say it
And the
is
funny
like
thing is,
it
that
is
one's
also a
more
bit of.
comic book accurate.
I will say it is a bit of another plot hole though, with Wolverine being like, I know a guy. He'd be a kid about now. It's like, when did you ever meet him? When did this happen?
Nightcrawler.
Yeah. Quicksilver. Yeah. I forgot all
Yeah.
about that. Oh my god.
Yeah, for the viewers at home that don't know, when we saw this movie in theaters and Wolverine says that scene, and I understand why Brad said this. Like
Right.
he's like, "Oh, I know a guy. He can get anywhere." So you think like, "Oh, he knows a guy that teleports, whatever." And literally, just out loud in the movie theater, our friend Brad just goes, "Nightcrawler," and then it just cuts to Peter Maximoff's house. He's just like.
I forgot. I
Just that
forgot all
noise
about
of
that.
confusion. It's great. We love you, Brad. Anyways, but no, like when Magneto busts out, they have that great scene on the airplane
Hmm.
where Magneto's, like he says, like how he was trying to save JFK because he was a mutant, and he says that how like his crew from like First Class, kind of like the first like Brotherhood, they were all like killed and experimented on by the government, except for Mystique. And he like has that great scene. He's like, "Where were you, Charles?" And he's like, "We were supposed to protect them," and it's great. And you think like they're gonna come together and like work together to stop this.
Nope.
But then when Magneto finds out that Mystique is the key to all of it, he just turns into Baron McBad guy. And like, I just feel like this Magneto, like, especially with his development with Mystique and how close he had gotten to her, I don't think he would have just like at the drop of a hat would have tried to kill her.
Right.
Maybe the Ian McKellen Magneto, but not this one. And I feel like maybe saving like a flip back to being a bad guy would have been better reserved at the end of the movie. I
Hmm.
think he should have stuck with them until like the big like thing with the Sentinels.
Hmm.
Like I think they should have fought the Sentinels at the end of the movie with Magneto, and maybe he turns again.
Right.
And like you said with like this finale, like it's not as good as the finale of First Class. It's all right.
Yeah.
I do really like the 70s Sentinels, like how they look. They're really cool looking.
Which I will
But
say
and
that that's another thing I forgot to mention. This movie is the best depiction of the Sentinels ever,
yeah, and even
especially
the
the
future
future ones.
Sentinels, like the future ones, like would I imagine they would look like that? No, but like what they do with them is really interesting because
Yeah.
they can like adapt and like copy like powers and stuff like that.
Hmm. And they're
I was like,
legit
that
kind
would
of
make sense.
terrifying.
Yeah, and it's like that would make sense how they would, hunt down and kill mutants other than just being robots with guns and
Yeah.
lasers and missiles and shit.
They
But
don't look like they're made out of Mega Blocks in this one.
yeah. But the cool thing is that if you want the kind of classic looking like purple ones, like well, you get that in the past, and that's what I really liked. I
Hmm.
like that we got to see like a futuristic one and an old one.
Hmm.
And but yeah, and like another thing, like I don't know if anybody's ever thought of this, but like to me, like this is another missed opportunity for the X-Men costumes. Like this was like because it's the 70s, things are cheesy. Like they should have had Wolverine and Beast suit up. Does anybody else feel that way?
I don't know.
I'm not saying
I
I'm
kind of
not
get.
saying like you got to make Hugh Jackman wear the mask or whatever, but I think Hugh Jackman should have worn like a brown and yellow like outfit. Cause like literally like when they go in the 70s, the only person that wears a costume is Magneto.
I don't know. I feel like with the context of this one being that the school shut down, there is no X-Men. I think it makes sense for them to not have suits.
Yeah, I just think for like the final act, it would have been cool
Yeah.
for them to wear something. But Because, like, I mean, the suits in the future are all right. It's just kind of, the black armor or whatever. But,
Right.
but yeah, and another thing, like, I mean, going into the next movie, this movie kind of ends on like a twist where, like, you see Stryker like pick up Wolverine in the water,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, oh, well, you see the yellow eyes, no Mystique's got him, so I guess the Weapon X program's not going to happen. Well, spoiler
Psych.
alert, psych, they completely ignore that, which
Yeah.
I was like, you could have done something with that, guys. But
Yeah.
no, this movie, I would say Days of Future Past for me is a B plus, because I think I love what it did for the franchise at the time, and, like, I'm a sucker for time travel, so, and that's, other than like just the Days of Future Past story, like, that's a big thing in the comics, like, especially with a lot of characters, like fan favorites like Cable and Bishop and stuff like that. I thought the action was a lot better in this movie, even though I think the final act's better than the previous. But no, I think it's a good, like, second part of a trilogy. But yeah.
Alrighty, Blake, go ahead.
So, I think
Uh-huh.
do let me okay. Do let me know if I break up or whatever.
Okay.
So, because that's important. But I think mainly what we have here is we have a good movie with a lot of great parts, and then a lot of parts that just could have been better and should have been better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think that's what we have going on here. But I mean, I remember when this was first announced, and Brian said, and again, like I said in the last episode, at the time,
Right.
what I thought of him back then.
We didn't know,
Um,
okay?
yeah. Um, we just knew him as a guy who made good decisions on previous films. But yeah, like when they announced that he was coming back, it's like, oh hell yeah, like that was cool. And I remember, and I'm surprised you didn't bring it up, Michael. I remember when the very first trailer for this dropped, and
Oh yeah.
it was using the Thin Red Line music by Hans Zimmer, and Michael and I probably watched that trailer 40 or 50 times that weekend
That was a
because
good
we just
trailer.
Oh, I watched it more than that. I watched it like 2 days in a row, like nonstop.
yeah, like that was an awesome trailer, and we were so excited for that. We're like, hell yeah, man, like again, sorry, but like we're like Brian Singer is back, baby. fucking comments that didn't age very well.
Yeah.
But it was like, no, like this is awesome. Like it looks like just a great movie. It looked like they were doing well, enough with the review of the trailer. No, so I think they kind of did like you said, Donnie. They had some moments where it's like, oh, it's a loose prequel, and then they had other moments where it's like it's a revamp, maybe not a full on reboot, but a revamp.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they were at the time they were just trying to keep their options open. Um, but no, I mean, I think they did do a pretty fair job at combining both generations together. And you know what? Like all the nitpicks you said, Donnie, like I don't think you're necessarily wrong for them. Like, the stuff that you bring up, I'm like, yeah, yeah. So for me, like there's every segment of this movie, I can pick out some stuff that I really liked, and I can pick out some stuff that I would have wanted to like more. And I guess I just choose to side with what I did like and just take it for, well, this is what I got, so be it. Um, and I it did the main complaint I do have is what you credited me for, and I thank you for that, is like this final conflict is really is like a copy paste. Like just instead of a Cuban beach, it's the White House lawn. Instead of Magneto having a bunch of missiles in place, he has a bunch of pistols in place. You have Charles Xavier that's like, I can't walk, and then you have Mystique. You have Mystique that's like, oh, I don't know what to do, and then you have Magneto that's like, this is how they want us to act. Like it's the same fucking ending, And
It
I
just has
feel like
less action.
yeah, and I feel like this movie doesn't get enough smoke for that. Like a lot of people let that shit slide, and I'm like, Bryan Singer, like you couldn't have made up your own ending. Like
I
you're the
also feel like going on to that point where you said, Blake, about how people didn't notice. I feel like kind of the same comparison where I said like Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. There was a bunch of people that went and saw The Dark Knight without seeing Batman Begins, and I feel like the same thing happened. I feel like there was probably a ton of people that went and saw this and didn't see First Class.
maybe. I guess statistically that is mathematically probable because this movie made much more money than First Class.
Hmm.
So I mean, I guess the numbers add up there. Um, but as far as so that's my biggest nitpick. That's my biggest gripe. And again, like I'm not going to try to discredit anything Donnie said. And as far as like Professor X coming back, all I can tell you about that, Donnie, is the movie said fuck it, and at that point I didn't give a shit. Like
It
I
didn't
was
just
just
say
like,
fuck it. It almost said fuck you.
and I said, you know what? Fuck me too. I was at this point, I was just glad to have everybody back. And to do a fast forward, the fixed future, where they do a quicker fucker upper and and Cyclops is alive and Jean is alive, like that is very therapeutic. That is
Hmm.
20th Century Fox trying to give us a good old hug for
We're
surviving the last
sorry.
stand. We're sorry. They gave us a hug and they may have squeezed one of our cheeks a little bit. But um but anyway, as far as like the final conflict, what I did like about it is, and I'm going to credit this to you, Donnie. It's like these movies do a really good job at making you understand Magneto, and they don't do a very good job at making you side with Charles.
Right.
Because Charles is like, no, we have to be the better people. We need to bend over backwards for them, and we need to bend over backwards for them. And I'm like, oh, you know what? Charles is just trying to be the optimist, and Charles is like being like, this is how they want us to act. And Magneto's like, no, they push us into acting this way, and then they dare to act like it's our fault. And I go, hey, you know what, Charles? Maybe it's time you shut the fuck up. It's just, yeah,
Oh, Charles, shut up.
yeah, it's this back and forth. It's this back and forth of, oh, you know what, Charles, I admire your optimism. And then it's like, Charles, quit being such a bitch. But yeah, like again, I choose to have more compliments for this movie than nitpicks. As far as Kitty Pryde's power that wasn't mentioned before, I mean, when we did see her that one other time only before, like we didn't get to know her for that long, and they could just say it was just a power she hadn't fully developed yet, which does lead into your gripe with it, Donnie, that is very valid, which is I shouldn't have to write half the backstory in my own head.
Hmm.
Like that is the job of the screenwriter. Like, but again, like there's a lot to debate about this movie or just discuss. But I guess not to drag on because I feel like I'd rather talk about the next two movies more. I'm gonna give Days of Future Past a B. And I will say that's a B plus. And I know on the scale it's just solid letters, but I love the opening to this movie where it's like Patrick Stewart narrating the future, and it looks so retro. Like you have all those purple lights, and they're wearing those collars that are yellow, like the neon. Like I absolutely love that. Like that shit slaps. But yeah, no, I choose to give it a B. I think it's not as good as the previous film, and it did take a few years for that to sink in with me. Like at first, I was like, "Oh yeah, it's the best X-Men movie." No, it just has a lot of parts that are very satisfying and more satisfying than the original trilogy. But yeah, it is a decent movie with great parts, but then a lot of parts that just could have been better.
We'll move on to the next one, X-Men Apocalypse. I saw this one for the first time just a couple days ago. I did not see this when it first came out in theaters, and really for no reason other than I just didn't go see it. But I remember, even though I didn't see it, I remember from the get-go thinking this movie is not going to get a fair shake, no matter how good or bad it is. And I knew that just because of people's reactions to the first images of Oscar Isaac as Apocalypse. Like, people were dragging those images through the fucking mud, and I'm just like, what do you guys expect? He looks like Apocalypse. Like, that is Apocalypse. I mean,
Like people wouldn't stop saying he looked like Ivan Ooze. It's like, all
right.
right, shut up.
Because of that first picture where, and I was like, guys, it's just the lighting of the scene. Like, he's not actually going to be purple. Like, you can even tell in that picture that he's not actually that color. And I'm just like, also just be grateful that he's not CGI, that they actually went through the trouble to make Apocalypse like live action and makeup and practical effects. Like, I just knew from the get go this movie was not going to get a fair shake. And after seeing it, I'm just going to go out and say this movie is really underappreciated. I mean, Oscar Isaac as Apocalypse, even if I don't necessarily care about whatever movie he's in, I always love Oscar Isaac, and there's no exception here. Like, I like Oscar Isaac as Apocalypse. I think it's great, and I think it was a great choice. And I mean, the team. This movie has the perfect team for the X-Men. I mean, you got Nightcrawler, one of my favorites. You got Beast. You got Cyclops. You got Storm. Storm's one of the Four Horsemen. She becomes part of the team in the next movie. But I mean, this movie has the perfect team. And I mean, just you got Quicksilver there, and oh man, just this movie was I really enjoyed Apocalypse. And I enjoyed seeing like Apocalypse gather his four horsemen. And I love that this movie really leaned into the like backstory of Apocalypse and like really went with a very epic scale, very grandiose theme of, he thinks he's actually a god, and his origins in ancient Egypt and all that, because that was kind of
Very
like
Phil Jones.
Yeah, very Phil
It was
Jones.
very Phil Jones.
There was even an Arby's somewhere in there. But because I remember when people started dragging those pictures of Oscar Isaac as Apocalypse through the mud, I kept hearing, he needs to be more like the cartoon. And I'm like, what, you want him to be traditionally animated? Like, I don't know what you're talking about here, but also, guys, in the 90s cartoon, Apocalypse is only in like 3 episodes, and they don't go into like who he is or what he is at all. Like, he's just there. He's like, I'm going to blow everything up, and then that's the end of the episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I really appreciate it that this movie really leaned into that epic scale that this character deserves.
And just to butt in there, Donnie, not just that, but like they don't even make in the cartoon, they don't even make Apocalypse an end all be all villain. He's just like a random middle of the road nuisance.
He shows up every once in a while. He's like, I'm gonna do something bad, and they're like, no, you're not. See you next week, kids.
Yeah,
they just make
X-Men Evolution did it better.
Yeah, that is an underrated cartoon, my friend.
It is, and he was the final like villain of the show too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sorry again, Donnie, but yeah, it's just like the animated series just made Apocalypse like this random side villain that's just fucking annoying.
Right. But this movie, I really appreciate that this movie really leaned into the scale and epic themes that this character deserves. I mean, he's called Apocalypse, for crying out loud. And I just love watching him gather his four horsemen. And, I think it's cool what they did with Storm. I think it's cool how he brings Magneto in. And, like, I know we were just joking about how Michael Fassbender's Magneto is just very, like, he goes through the same arc in every movie. But in this one, I feel like I honestly like Magneto's arc in this movie more than First Class, because it feels much more organic, Like, yes, First Class, it fits. Like, he's like, I agree with everything you said, but you killed my mom. He's a victim of his environment, a product of his environment, and a victim of his environment. But Apocalypse, like, it starts off with him like, you know what? He's like, I never really did give Charles, like, Method a chance. I never did try to be just the peaceful face in the crowd. And he actually gives it a legitimate, genuine try. And how are his efforts rewarded? He saves a worker who like almost dies on the job, and they turn him into the cops and they kill his wife and kid. It's like, yeah, I'd fucking hate people too if that happened to me. It's much more organic, and there's just a lot like that scene when his wife and kid are killed, like that hits hard. And I think I like Magneto. Like, I think this one has the best Magneto story. as far as the First Class movies go, at least. Um, and I just, yeah, like I said, it has the best team, and that final act is awesome. Just the X-Men fighting the Four Horsemen. Um, as far as my gripes with this movie, I don't feel like the Wolverine cameo was really necessary, especially since, like you said, Mike, it doesn't like they don't do anything with the end of Days of Future Past when Mystique pulls them out of the ocean. Like they don't even
Yeah,
see
they
each
just
other.
straight up ignore it.
Yeah, and then also it's kind of creepy when like Jean calms them down and everything with her powers. I'm just like, oh God. The only thing I can think of is Logan waking up in the beginning of the first movie and just be like, hey, I remember you when you were a teenager. Let's kiss.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's not only was that scene kind of not only was the Wolverine cameo kind of unnecessary, it just was kind of weird considering what we
It was
know
just
what comes
it was
after.
just it was just forced fan service because they showed him in like the Weapon X outfit from the comics where he's got the helmet and shit
Exactly.
and the wires hanging off of him.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's all it was.
I also feel like we need a little bit more with Psylocke. Like we didn't really get enough for her to really develop. Um, Kind of the same thing with Angel, although I feel like I wasn't really missing it as much with Angel. I feel like we got enough with him. Like I love that they made him like he's a cage fighter. I love that they gave his wingtips like those claw tips, so he's like scratching the hell out of people, like gouging the back of their heads out and everything. Like, and it was just cool seeing Archangel
Yeah.
in a movie. Like, I think that was really cool.
I wish
And
they would have made his face blue.
yeah, that would have been cool. Um, and I also like probably my biggest gripe with this movie, as cool as Apocalypse is, he doesn't really do anything through the whole movie. And it's a shame because like it's really a movie of him almost doing stuff, and he's cool, like he's got some cool moments, like that scene when he's like firing all the world's nukes straight into space, and he has that line where you can fire from the Tower of Babel and still never hit God. That's some cool shit. But like that's about where his cool shit begins and ends. Like he doesn't really do anything through the whole movie. And if the movie isn't blue balling you somewhere with him, it's blue balling you with something else. Like that scene when Professor X, invades Apocalypse's mind and he's like, "You want to see what I see? You're in my house now." And he just starts beating the shit out of him. Like, "Yeah, whoop his ass, Charles." And just for 3 seconds later, for Apocalypse to wipe the goddamn floor with him. Um, it just really, it just really fucking let the air out of my balloons, man. Um, so I feel like Apocalypse really either needed to be two parts, like have the first part end with them like getting ready to fight the Four Horsemen, and the second part just be that entire battle, or it just needed to be a 3 hour long movie because I feel like trying to give Apocalypse more to do in this time span would have just made the movie too crunched. So I feel like it just needed more. Apocalypse needed to actually do something. He needed to actually like participate in stuff. And it's just such a shame because I really enjoyed this movie. I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. And like this movie is so close to being an A that it is legitimately frustrating that it's not, because there's just some minor tweaks would have just really made this movie fantastic. Like not just that, a few minor tweaks would have made this the best X-Men movie in my opinion. Um, so I mean, I got to give Apocalypse a very solid B. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, so I know I sound like a broken record, but like I was so pumped for this movie before it was coming out. Um, I was just so excited for them to finally do Apocalypse. Like
Hmm.
I've been waiting to see him on the big screen like since childhood. Just because I think he's one of the like everybody loves Magneto, but like I never saw Magneto as a villain. Like to me, like Apocalypse is the ultimate X-Men villain.
Hmm.
Like he's the end all be all. And I just really wanted to see like Bryan Singer kind of embrace, and like the other filmmakers like embrace the more comic booky side of the X-Men,
Mhm.
because I feel like that's where this trilogy was starting to go, because the first original trilogy was kind of a little more grounded, a little more dark looking.
Mhm.
This movie is like very, very colorful.
Yeah.
Like with Apocalypse, there's the very strong like blues, and like the the Four Horsemen. You have like Psylocke's like purple costume from the comics,
Yeah.
and like Archangel with like his like silver metal wings and all that shit, and just like this one, like the natural progression of each decade, like First Class was the 60s, Days of Future Past is the 70s, and Apocalypse is the 80s, and like the 80s was like a big time in the comics for X-Men. And this movie like just like oozes the 80s, and I love that.
Mhm.
Just like even seeing like the street clothes of like the X-Men and stuff like that, like Cyclops and Jean and all them, like when they're going to the movies and they're hanging out with Jubilee and stuff like that. I love all that stuff. I think don't they go see Return of the Jedi?
Yeah, they
Yes.
do.
It's
Yes. Yeah,
Brian Singer uses Return of the Jedi to dunk on The Last Stand, and it's kind of beautiful.
yeah, because he's like making fun of, like, he says how third parters are never the best,
I
which
will
is funny
say
because Apocalypse was the third movie.
it's kind of lame that like Jubilee gets to hang out with the mall crew, but she doesn't join them for the final battle.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, and that's a kind of recurring thing. They kept having like cameos of Jubilee in like a
Yeah.
bunch of the movies, but then she never does anything. Like
Yeah.
this is the one where she does the most, but like
Yeah, she
after
goes to the
the
mall.
mansion, yeah, after the mansion blows up, she does nothing.
Yeah.
Wait, when else is she in it?
The first one.
She's in the
She's
first
in the
movie?
she's in the first two original X-Men movies.
Yeah.
She's
Really?
like yeah, she's a student like in the background.
Yeah, it's like you blink and you miss it, but she's there.
Oh,
Yeah.
I had no idea she. Oh, okay. I had no idea.
Yeah, they kept having like glorified cameos with her, but like they just kept not doing anything with her. But anyways, um, like you said, like with the scenes with Magneto, Donnie, those are great scenes.
Mhm.
But like I said, I feel like those scenes are dampered down because of what they did to him in Days of Future Past. I think would have made those scenes more perfect is if, like I said, like once they, saved him from the prison and like told him what was going to happen in the future, like, hey, if we keep acting like this and let them do this, like all this bad shit's going to happen. I think if Magneto had changed his ways and turned like completely good, and then this happened, it would have been even more of a gut punch.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I feel
I agree.
like
I
not
agree.
like not have him like put on the Magneto suit and control like the Sentinels and be a bad guy and attack like Washington
Yeah.
D.C. Like no, like if he was just a straight up good guy like one of the X-Men, which is also a thing in like Age of Apocalypse, um, and like then he settles down and has a family, and then that happens to him, like then it would have been like the ultimate gut punch. Because still, like Michael Fassbender's killing it. Like when he's holding like his dead daughter, and
Mhm.
he's like, "Is this what you want from me? Is this all I'm good for?" Or however he says it, like that was great.
Yeah.
And how Apocalypse plays on that, like yeah, that was really good. And like how he brings him back to the concentration camp and like enhances his powers.
Yeah.
But yeah, and like speaking of, like I said with Evan Peters, I actually think his scene where he saves everybody at the mansion trumps the previous scene. I mean, it's basically just the same scene, but I think they made it even better in this one. Like I thought
Yeah.
that this one was so funny, like him running around with like the food and he's like has the dog and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And he's so funny in this movie. Like I love when William Stryker like has them in prison and
Mhm.
he says something to him
Oh, he says,
and then
where is Charles? Where is Magneto? And Mystique's
yeah,
like, we don't know. And he goes, we don't know, bro.
I love that. He's like, "We don't know, bro." And he's great in this movie. Like
I like when
he's
he
probably
wakes up in the cell and he sees Beast is all blue and fro. He's like, "Oh, what'd you do to us? Is that gonna happen to us?"
yeah, it's not gonna happen to us.
He's
Yeah,
like
like
he's like
he's definitely the standout of this movie.
Magneto, he's my father. What? He and my mom, they did it.
Yeah, but the funny thing is, even though they keep making jokes and like hints of that, they still don't really like address that.
Oh, don't worry, we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, and like I was saying earlier, they finally get to Cyclops, and what's that actor's name? Ty Sheridan.
Yeah.
Ty Sheridan. I actually thought he was a decent Cyclops.
Hmm.
Could add a little more to do, but like the groundwork was there. And I liked Sophie Turner as Jean Grey. She was from Game of Thrones. Like I thought these were like really good setups for like a young Cyclops and Jean Grey,
Hmm.
and also like Storm because the I thought it was kind of cool that they introduced Storm as like a villain with the Four Horsemen.
Yeah, I really like that they took
Um,
liberties with like who the four horsemen were in this movie.
yeah, and I was totally fine with that because the Four Horsemen in the comics are just random mutants that are just being introduced when they become the Horsemen, except for like Angel.
Right.
Angel's really the Angel's really the only like well-known Horseman.
Right.
But like, yeah, I like how they kind of like took liberties and like they made like Magneto, Storm, and Cyclops the other three. And yeah, I will say like, yeah, Angel and Psylocke are kind of just there. They're just kind of just henchmen,
Hmm.
and I wish they had a little more to do. Um, I thought Olivia Munn was a really good choice for Psylocke, but they just didn't do enough with her.
Right.
Um, but yeah, and I will say, I was talking to these guys before we started. I love Oscar Isaac. I think he's an amazing actor, but I can't like looking back, I can't help but think that he might have been a little miscast. I don't think he carries the gravitas of like this this evil god like being like he just doesn't have that like boom, and it's not like a size thing because I love that they went the practical way and did makeup and like they didn't do like a CG character that was like the big as the Hulk or whatever.
Hmm.
I don't care about that. I don't know, it's just his presence and his voice, like he just doesn't do it for me. He's okay. Like he's not bad. It's not like, oh, not my apocalypse. Like, God, that sounds like an emo song from the 2000s. Not my apocalypse.
I love it.
Yeah, I feel like they could have gotten somebody else. Um, I will say though, like even though like he's the titular character, like his name is in the title and he's the main antagonist. I feel like we don't know anything about him. Like he has all these crazy powers and like he's basically like a mutant god, but it's like they show why he has those powers. I'll give him that. Like they had the thing at the beginning of the movie in like ancient Egypt how like he's like old and frail and then he hops to a new body which was like the Oscar Isaac body, and they show like, oh well, he has like regeneration, and now he wants to hop into Charles's body because he's such a powerful telepath. And I kind of thought it was kind of weird that that's the reason why Charles Xavier's bald. I just thought like, well, he's an old guy and he lost his hair. But yeah, I just love that. Like, we gotta have a scene that shows how Charles Xavier went bald. So it's so important to his character that he's bald. And I know it's I
Bald
thought it was
head.
funny. Like they kept making like hair jokes. Like they make like the "Don't touch my hair" joke and
Hmm.
First Class, and then they kind of like just his look in Days of Future Past is the exact opposite. It's like, oh, he's got long hair and a beard, and it's just like, okay, yeah, we get it. Charles Xavier goes bald. Like, it's not that big of a deal. But it's almost like they make like Charles's like baldness like the equivalent to like Magneto's helmet. It's like Magneto's helmet has like significance, like it protects him from telepathy and stuff like that. Like it's like a plot device. Like being bald is just being bald.
Yeah, well, without all that hair in the way, he's able to be an even more powerful telepath.
Yeah, it's like his brain waves are stronger. But yeah, and I also like, even though I love the cinematography and the way that like ancient Egypt scene is shot. It reminds me very much like Stargate, and like I fucking love the movie Stargate. So it was like giving me Stargate vibes with like ancient alien shit, and like I thought that was cool. But like they don't delve into it enough. Like I want to know more. It's like, all right, well, like, so Apocalypse jumps from like body to body, but like how did he start off? Like, was he a mutant that just hops from body to body? Like, was he like what's going on? Because like in the comics, the reason he has like the whole suit with the futuristic tubes and shit is because he finds like he's like a mutant in ancient Egypt that finds like celestial technology. I know you can't use the celestials because like MCU and all that stuff, but like they could have expanded on it more with like aliens and stuff like that. Which, they're bringing aliens in the next movie, but we'll get to that. Um, but yeah, I feel like we didn't know enough about Apocalypse. Like he's just batty McBad guy, and like he has all these powers, but like I feel like they don't they don't show us like what his powers. So they say why, but they don't show what. Like what all can he do? Like I feel like he just kind of like sand mummy power stuff and can like grow giant and all that. But but I will say, to me, like the ending of this movie, like the very end, is
Hmm.
perfect.
Hmm.
Like the scene where like Mystique like does her speech, and like she says like, oh, you're not kids anymore, you're X-Men, and like we finally get to see, like, not counting the last stand, but we finally get to see like a legit danger room, like even if it's only for a second. And you see like all of them turn around, and like you get to see Cyclops, Jean Grey, Storm, Nightcrawler, like in very like comic accurate suits. Like
Hmm.
Cyclops is wearing like the blue with like the gold like sash, and like yeah, Nightcrawler's wearing like a red and black outfit, and you just see him like look at the wall, and like the wall opens up, and like fake like sentinels come out, and just literally the final shot is Professor X like with the doors like closing right in front of him. Ah, it's
I,
so good. Like that was like to me, like that's where it should have ended, because at that point the modern X-Men were born there. So like you could have cut, print, it's done.
and also had, I mean,
Um
it would have been even better to end there because it would have come full circle with the reference to the ending of the original movie when Charles and Eric are having that conversation. Like, does it ever keep you up at night, the thought of them coming here to take your children away from you? And it does. Well,
right, yeah.
what do you do? Well, I feel a great swell of pity for anybody who comes to my school looking for trouble.
Yeah, it's like yeah, it should have just ended there. But oh yeah, and then there was another thing I wanted to bring up. This movie, the Days of Future Past is guilty of it too, but like this movie, like on a negative, one of my complaints, this movie like reeks of like Jennifer Lawrence popularity. Like you can tell, like, I mean, she has an important part in First Class, but you can tell like, this is when the Hunger Game movies were coming out. Like they were like really like throwing Jennifer Lawrence down your throat, and I really like Jennifer Lawrence. I think she's an amazing actress, but like they were really like pushing Mystique. Like they kept saying the thing like when they go to like the Fight Club where like Nightcrawler and Angel is, and they're like, oh, she's the what did they say? Like,
The
oh, she's
hero.
like the savior, the
Yeah.
hero or the savior. And it's like I don't fucking give a shit about Mystique, man. Like I just want to see the X-Men. Like I don't know. I like that they gave Mystique more to do, but it kind of got to the point where like they were giving her too much to do. Like especially when characters like Psylocke and Angel like get nothing,
Hmm.
and like Mystique is getting too much just because of the actor who's playing her. And you can tell very much at this point like Jennifer Lawrence is starting to get to the points where she wants out of the franchise, because I feel like her acting like kind of gets a little worse each movie. But yeah, but that's just a little nitpick for me. But overall, this movie, I would give it a B. It's like a B minus for me. Definitely the third best of this quadrilogy.
All right, Blake, your turn.
Yeah. I think this movie gets way too much flack. It's just it definitely has its flaws. It definitely has things that could have been better. Um, but like Days of Future Past had plenty of stuff that could have been better. But that was overall accepted, and not just accepted; it was praised. Like that's like certified fresh in the 90s, like 90 some percent, and like it made, 200 million more dollars than this. And then by the time this movie came out, I feel like it got Amazing Spider-Man 2'd, where a lot of people were just being
Yeah.
pissy. A lot of people were just being pissy pricks because it wasn't officially in the MCU.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like that didn't piss you off 2 years ago. Why are you upset about it now? And it's like just give it a fair chance. Like just enjoy it for what it is. And like I think this movie is basically just a 2.5 hour live action episode of the 90s cartoon. In fact, it's better because it does a better job with Apocalypse.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I understand what you're trying to say, Michael, but I think it just didn't want to dilly dally. Like, I think it gave you a little bit more about Apocalypse. Like, it made you understand what he thinks he is and what his attitude and personality is. But it also kept some mystery there. Like, it didn't want to spoil the mystery of it. Um, but yeah, no, I think Apocalypse's plan in this movie is absolutely terrifying, where like he wants to be everybody all at once. And it's like that's scary as shit. And it's like that's what Apocalypse should be. He should be scary. And I mean, I'm sure somewhere out there they could have gotten somebody that nailed the part a little bit better, but that's almost every role. Like no matter what, like this person could have played it well, or that person could have played it well, and I think who they landed on, I think he did a great job. I loved him, even if there are times where he sounds like what if Winnie the Pooh was an edgelord, um, like when it's not
I don't
doing
know. You're right. I don't think you're helping your argument saying that.
there's just when he's not doing the echo yell or whatever, there's just little moments where he's like, "We will cleanse this world with strongest."
Oh,
and,
bother.
and then there are other parts where it sounds like he and Charles Xavier are trying to have a competition of who can sound more like Lord Voldemort, where like Apocalypse is yelling, and then you have Charles being like, "Jean, release your power." It's just Christ, he sounds like Ray Fiennes when he's like trying to kill Daniel Radcliffe. Um, but no, it's just like, guess what? They didn't make him CGI, and you know what? For that, I want to give these people a fist bump. Like mad respect for that shit. They didn't make him CGI. They didn't do some motion capture bullshit. They go, no, we're gonna make a real suit and we're gonna paint his face. And it's like, wow, what a concept. Like, and I think it fit well with like the ancient Egypt aspect of it. Like the way they meshed what Apocalypse looks like with like ancient Egypt. Like I thought that was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess my only gripe with him, other than his voice at times, is like, and I know this sounds superficial, it sounds petty, but like he could have been a little bit taller. Like
Boo.
when he what? I'm sorry. Like when he assembles his horsemen, he's like the shortest one there. And but I do like how Apocalypse himself is very superficial, where it's like, hold up, now that you're my horseman, before we do our plan, I need to make your outfits look fucking sick. It's just like
Yeah.
he's making his like retro boy band or whatever, like his new wave hair metal. It's like, oh man, you guys are gonna look so dope in a few minutes.
I mean, that's pretty much what he does in the comics when he makes Angel Archangel.
Yeah, he's just like slowly having his hand go over Archangel. He's like, yeah, it's fucking tight. I love that. And but no, like I loved the Hugh Jackman cameo in First Class. But this one, This is perhaps my favorite use of the F-bomb in a PG-13 movie because it relieves all that tension and stuff, in which people can use that against it. But I just love that. Like Magneto is like about ready to kill those people. The portal opens up. He turns around. It's just silent. There's this pause. You don't know what he's going to say or what's going to happen. Then finally, Michael Fassbender just goes, "Who the fuck are you?"
Yeah,
Like, I
that was a
I
good one.
I love that. But he says it in his accent, like, "Who the fuck are you?" It's great. It's great. Um, yeah, like it's pretty sad how in this one movie, Ty Sheeran got more to do with Cyclops than James Marsden.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I liked him. I thought he did a good job, and I like him as an actor. And I like Sophie Turner's Jean Grey. I especially love their little moment where he finally gets his glasses, which I think that was a nice touch on. It's like they're just Ray-Bans that are like modified with like the rose crystal or whatever. I don't know,
Ruby
but
Ruby
Quartz.
Quartz.
yes, yes. But he goes over to Jean Grey to like kind of break the ice, and
Mm-hmm.
and just their little moments with each other, their little chemistry. I'm like, oh, they love each other. I
No
love it.
kiss.
But no, I love that. I thought it was very nice, and I especially love where Nightcrawler's like, oh, I want to see what America's like, and
Yeah.
it's like Scott just goes, hey, you're not going to get it from here. The only the only thing American about this house is that it used to be British. But
Which I forgot to mention. I love Nightcrawler in this movie.
oh, he's awesome, and like they got now. This is a guy for the age range they wanted to go for. They got the perfect kid to play him in this.
Yeah.
I
Um,
love that he's kind of wearing like a Michael Jackson outfit, like in their
Yeah.
street clothes.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I love it. I love it. But no, I thought it did the '80s era very well. Um, and but no, like some good powerful scenes, like the stuff with Magneto, and it was good. The Wolverine cameo, I know a lot of people are very nostalgic for that Weapon X outfit. For me, it always kind of tickled me because he's basically wearing that thing that Rick Moranis wore in the first Ghostbusters when they're doing tests on him. Where-
Yes,
where
have some.
yeah, yeah, exactly. He's like, yes, have some. I just think of
Vince
that.
Clark, the Keymaster Gozer.
I just think of the guy on the chariot. Like, what an asshole.
You a parachute flame?
But no, like to your point, Donnie, where like people, this movie was never going to get a fair shake for whatever reason. Like even before they saw it,
Yeah.
and it's just like they were complaining about what Psylocke looked like, and they go, "That looks like cosplay," and I'm like,
That's what
Psylocke's
Psylocke.
out.
Yeah.
Psylocke's outfit, that is probably the most comic book accurate outfit I've ever seen in a superhero movie. Now,
Yeah.
granted, the original illustration itself is not that complex of an outfit. She's basically in a Victoria's Secret purple thing,
Yeah.
but like
Yeah, she's
people
just in
are,
like a purple one piece.
yeah, and it's like, oh yeah, Psylocke's outfit looks terrible. It's like, what the fuck do you people want from this movie? Um, but yeah, but when I saw her in that, I was like, behold, the easiest cosplay you can ever do at Comic Con.
Yeah.
But I thought it worked. I thought it worked. And I think above all else, more than anything else, this is the most fun X-Men movie. Where like First Class, was a good blend, and Days of Future Past went for more like philosophical, like, plot driven stuff. But it has the final act in Days of Future Past is just not satisfying enough. The final act in this one, like Brian Singer tried to deliver the goods, to his credit, or Simon Kinberg when he would step in. But we'll get into that in the next movie. But yeah, I just felt like this was the X-Men movie that was just trying to tell us, I just want you guys to have a good time. I just want you to have some fun. Um, I think the way I look at it is it's like the Indiana Jones adventures. Like I acknowledge Raiders of the Lost Ark as the best one in the series, but The Last Crusade is my personal favorite. And with this, like Apocalypse is kind of my personal favorite, just because once again, not to beat a dead horse, not to beat the same drum, but it's just the one I have the most fun with. Like it's good. It's I think each thing, and yeah, I prefer the Quicksilver. Um, segment in this movie over Days of Future Past when he shows up, like, because there's that tension of like Charles getting abducted, Havoc blowing up the X jet. It's just like, holy shit, what's gonna happen? And then by the 4th or 5th second of that bee being frozen, I was just like, oh hell yeah. And he just walks into frame and is doing Sweet Dreams, and he's having the Twinkie, and he's like, huh? but no, it's just a damn fun movie. And when there's other movies where when I get done them, I'm like, why did people love that so much? But with this movie, I'm like, why did you all hate this so much? Like, was it really that bad? I just remember the early reviews calling it a franchise-ending disaster. And it's like, where was the disaster? Like,
Yeah.
again, I have some notes. There's some stuff that could have been tweaked. But again, like, I think what we got was pretty fun. And I'm going to try to wrap it up right here, Mike, to repeat you. The last scene of this movie is perfect. It is a chef's kiss. They should have just ended it there. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
and I guess not to do a fast forward, but like with the next movie, I'm like, why aren't you wearing the outfits you had in the last scene of Apocalypse? Like, what was the point of that? But yeah, no, I will give X-Men Apocalypse a B. Whether it's your favorite one, whether you think it's one of the better ones, I think it is the most underrated X-Men movie, and I give it a B. Solid B.
Big old B. All right, well, let's move on to the last movie of the evening, X-Men Dark Phoenix.
Oh, fuck.
So this was the other X-Men movie I watched for the first time this week. And you know what? I went in hearing, all the trash reviews about it since it came out, and especially from you, Blake, because you watched it for the first time this last week, and hearing just not good things from you. And I went in just like, all right, how much of a train wreck is this going to be? And you know what? I got like a half hour in. I'm like, okay, I'm not hating the movie, but it's still early. And I'm getting an hour into the movie, and I'm like, yo, is this going to be another moment like Last Jedi where I end up liking this movie and people think I'm retarded? Because not only am I not hating this movie, I'm actually kind of enjoying it like an hour in. I'm like, I'm not seeing anything bad yet. I'm like, they're actually building up Jean as a character. The Dark Phoenix is actually taking center stage and doing things and is the focus, unlike Last Stand. I'm like, yo, so far this movie's hitting all the marks. Like, all right. And then the aliens started doing their thing, whatever their thing was. And then, the final third of the movie happened, and all that goodwill got sucked right out of me. The final act of this movie really truly feels like Simon Kinberg got confused and fucked his dad. Because legitimately,
There you go, Donnie. Even someone who's not in on it loves it.
like, legit, I would argue the first half, maybe even first 2/3 of this movie, is legitimately good. It's doing everything right. And then it just feels like with that final chunk, they just want to be like, all right, how can we fuck everything over in record time? And not just for this movie, for everything that came before it. Because the aliens, the dime store Groot looking motherfuckers, what are they? Who are they? What's their deal? We don't know. And they give you an idea of how bad this is, and it's not just me. Jessica Chastain didn't know her character's name until she saw the movie. What the fuck? And the final quote unquote fight in this movie is the cinematic equivalent to a final boss fight in a video game being entirely quick time events. Like, she blows up a
Yeah.
bunch of aliens, and then they have this cheesy fucking line, your emotions make you weak, flies the alien into space. Nuh-uh, they make me strong, and then they both blow up. Huh? why did Jean like it also doesn't why did Jean blow up? I don't understand what happened here. And it's so frustrating like how this movie went so south in record time. Because like I said, like beginning up until that final act, like I'm like, okay, like I had some, complaints. Like, first off, I don't like that Mystique and Charles are still fucking having the same argument over and over again in this movie. I'm like, you guys are 4 movies in, 30 years later. Like, I feel like having this same argument just really undermines all of your development as characters and as like your relationship amongst each other. Um, I feel like Magneto is a part of this movie as an obligation. Like, I feel like he's just there because they felt like he had to be. Um, I also just, on the one hand, I kind of like that there's like the idea of Charles always looking out for the greater good, but then like not realizing that that can cause problems with, that can cause sacrifices on the end of individualism. But then there's moments where it just kind of feels like Charles was just kind of a dick. Like, other than that, though, before that final act, I'm like, okay, like I like Jean's backstory. I like that, she's actually doing stuff. I like that I'm actually, given stuff to care about with her as a character. Um, and I like that the Phoenix is actually doing things and is actually a force to be feared. But then I also like started like after that final act when everything just went wrong, I also started looking back to everything that came before it. First off, the ending to this movie completely contradicts the ending to Days of Future Past, which is annoying because that ending is amazing. Um, and then also Apocalypse hints at the Phoenix. Like Jean makes the Firebird when she fights Apocalypse. Did we need this whole shit with the solar flare and the weird ass aliens chasing after it? I don't. Did we really need it? What was the point of it? And
Yeah,
just
they just totally ignore how she created the Firebird in Apocalypse. But then there's the whole Phoenix Force in space. It's like all you got to do is just take 2 hours out of your time to watch the previous movie.
right. And it's just that final act just really straight
It's
up murdered any bit of goodwill that I was getting from this movie beforehand.
sorry to butt in, but like it's double worse because Simon Kinberg co-wrote the screenplays for the other films too.
Exactly. It's just I don't know what went wrong with that final act. I don't know what happened. Maybe he did actually fuck his dad. I don't know. But I
The
have never
world may never know.
I have never seen a movie do a complete 180 as fast as this one did. And like it legit gave me fucking whiplash. Because the second they got on that train at the end of the movie when they're all in the, the power inhibiting colors and everything, I just got this feeling like, wow, something bad is going on right now. And I don't mean bad as in the situation they're in. I mean like I'm suddenly not having fun anymore. And just why did we need the aliens? It commits the same mistake that the fucking Last Stand made, which again, Simon Kinberg was a part of that movie. He got the ultimate mulligan and he fucked it up. If you are going to do a movie with the Dark Phoenix, make the Phoenix the villain. We don't need a second villain. Let the Phoenix be the villain. And like it's bad enough because I feel like even before, we started hearing about Disney buying Fox, we knew this was going to be the last X-Men movie, at least with this crew. And to just think that like you ended it like that? God damn, man. Like I was really like I've been pondering for the past couple days where I would put this movie, and I'm still kind of struggling with it. Like I said, that first 2/3 is a solid movie. Like I would recommend if you're watching this movie, the second they get on the train, just turn the movie off and just tell yourself they all died. It's le- it's less traumatic that way. Um, But that final act just really absolutely kills everything good that this movie was doing. I don't agree with this movie being the lowest rated movie in the franchise. Like, it's at a 22% on Rotten Tomatoes. I don't agree with that. I would still much rather watch this over The Last Stand. So I got to give The Dark Phoenix a D. It is a very blatant, obvious D. Go ahead, Mike.
Um, so this movie sucks balls. I'll just throw that out there.
I'm officially in Michael's corner right now.
uh, just I just don't, and I understand like Bryan Singer brought Simon Kimber back, and like I think with Bryan Singer he does a fine job, but giving the keys to the final X-Men movie to Simon Kinberg alone was a very, very, very bad decision. And you could just tell the 20th Century Fox just didn't give a shit anymore because they knew they were getting bought out. So they're like,
Yeah.
fuck it, do whatever the fuck you want.
And I think
Like,
that,
no restriction.
and I think that's probably the, if not the biggest, it's definitely a big reason why I don't give this movie a straight out F, because I gotta place some blame on the studio, because like you said, like they knew, like they were talking with Disney back in 2017, and while Disney wasn't in a position to make decisions themselves, that had to influence the production to some degree.
Right. And I don't know, just this movie, there, like with, I was saying to Blake before with this because he was kind of like texting me as he was watching it. There's just something to me. There's just something off from this movie from the get go. It's the tone and like the cinematography. The something with the cinematography in this movie. It's not that it looks like cheap or anything. It's just it's kind of dull. Like coming from Apocalypse that is like this very larger than life story and super colorful. Like all the like color and life is just drained out of this movie. They go from like we were talking about how that final scene in Apocalypse is just like there's the X-Men, like they're wearing like very comic book accurate costumes
Mm-hmm.
to just wearing like sweatshirt material windbreakers that are like a plain blue with like regular yellow X's on them and just like regular pants. Like it's such a downgrade. Like I was so disgusted when I saw those. Like they were just such a major downgrade. And another big thing, like a big thing with this whole quadrilogy is kind of like representing the time it takes place in.
Mm-hmm.
Like First Class, there's stuff with the 60s throughout the whole thing. Days of Future Past, the 70s, like they show shit from like the Vietnam War. Um, Apocalypse was very much in the 80s, like all the like pop culture stuff and their outfits and all the bright colors. Like this movie like is supposed to be in the 90s and you would not know it at all. Like if you didn't watch the previous movies and just like you took someone and sat them down and this is the first of these X-Men movies they ever saw, like you would not know it's the 90s. Like it just looks like regular old plain boring today. Like there's nothing from the 90s in this. And that's a damn shame because that's a huge missed opportunity because the 90s was very much the X-Men's heyday. Like
Renaissance
that
of
was
the books.
that was the X-Men's like most popular era because you had when X-Men went back to issue number 1 and it's the to this day still the highest selling comic book of all time. And it's also when the animated series came out. And that's the most popular media that the X-Men has ever been released in was the animated series. Like anybody who just any Joe Schmo who hasn't read a comic like knows the X-Men cartoon.
Hmm.
And they really dropped the ball on that. But yeah, like you said with studio interference, like they just didn't give a shit. Um, the plot, it just it's kind of you just feel that like nobody gives a shit. Like nobody was like putting in their A game for this. Like it was kind of one of those things like
Jennifer Lawrence
where
pieced
everybody
out the first chance she got.
yeah, like you could just feel like everybody knows like they're getting laid off or whatever, so they're just
Yeah.
like, whatever. Like it wasn't kind of like oh, this is the last movie, so we got to go out with a bang. Like it very much went out with a whimper. And it's really sad because some of the newer people they introduced in the previous movie, like the actors for Cyclops and Jean and Storm and Nightcrawler, were all really likable, but they're just not give it. They just don't have enough to do. And I will say I like that they even though it doesn't make sense with the continuity, I do like they did the whole thing where they went into space and the Phoenix Force came from outer space. I like that they did that. I was like, okay, that's from the comics. Um, the villains were the other villains, whatever they are. I guess they're supposed to be like a cross between the Skrulls because they shapeshift in the Shi'ar Empire,
I don't know.
mainly
The
the
movie doesn't
Shi'ar
tell you.
Empire. Yeah, they don't say who they are, and but their role I guess is kind of the Shi'ar Empire because in the comics they were involved with like the Dark Phoenix saga and like they were like the alien empire that the X-Men always fought, but like yeah, they don't. My thing is these whole movies there's only just been humans and mutants. And to go and like introduce aliens for the first time in the fourth movie of the prequels, like that's a big ball drop. Like you need to add a little more context to that. Show a little more. If you're gonna like throw aliens into the picture, you need to have a little more backstory with them. Like you just don't throw them in and just like, oh, well, these are the bad guys and they want the Phoenix powers. Like that's not good enough. Like that's like watching. That's like if they made like a fourth Lord of the Rings movie and like Barney like shows up and is like going after Frodo. Like it doesn't make any fucking sense. You got to give me a little context. Well, why is he here?
Oh, give us the
Where
precious, Frodo.
it's like where'd they come from? It's like I don't know. It's just it was a little much. Um, and just I don't know. Like if the MCU, which if and when, which they will, like bring back the X-Men, I don't think they should do the Dark Phoenix saga anymore. Like I think at this point it's kind of jinxed. I think they should just kind of skip it.
Or at the very
Like
least,
it's
don't do it
just
for a very long time.
yeah, like just there's something with it. Like, and I get it. Like I get it. It's a pivotal moment in the comics. Like Jean Grey, a beloved member of the team, like turns evil against her will, and the big thing is the shocking thing how like she kills herself to like stop it and stuff. But like I'm not trying to sound mean to like comic book purists, but like, is there really that much there? Like, I feel like there's tons of X-Men stories that we could just do otherwise. Like, I think at this point, like the Dark Phoenix saga just needs to stay in the comics and stay off the big screen. Um, I know that might be X-Men heresy, but like, I don't know. I just think it's jinxed. And speaking of like the final scene, like how the final scene apparently was going to be different, but the whole train sequence was a bunch of reshoots because apparently the ending was too similar to Captain Marvel's ending. I'm not sure how that went, but just that final fight scene on the train. I mean, it's choreographed well, but like I feel like to go from like fighting Apocalypse and having this huge epic battle where the fate of the world's at stake to like just kind of a run of the mill action scene on a train.
And I
It's
also,
just such a downgrade.
not only that, I also really hate during that scene when, like, Charles and Jean have that like psychic moment where she's just like, I understand you did what you did out of love. I forgive you. It's like, bitch, he's been trying to tell you that for 40 fucking minutes.
Yeah, and it's just like
And she just forgives him
like,
after like all the shit. It's like, bitch, like
yeah, and just I don't know, for that to be like the end, it's like that's it. And then like yeah, Jean Grey like does she I don't even remember, does she blow up or
she just blows
disappear?
up. She just blows up.
Yeah, she blows up.
It's
She
why?
blows up. And then it just has this kind of like nonchalant scene of, Charles and Magneto playing chess, which is fine, that's their thing. But they're just out like they're like outside of a restaurant or some shit.
Yeah.
And like it's just like kind of this nonchalant thing. Oh, well, no, I'm Charles Xavier. No, I'm Magneto. Ho, you. Will things ever get better? Oh, who the fuck knows? Our franchise is over, and then it just ends. Like, like it's just, it's like this movie's like nails on a chalkboard, and it's just what a way to like flush it down the drain. And I know it's not all Simon Kinberg's fault. It's not the actor's fault. It's really much the state of when this movie was being made.
Yeah, because
But
I was reading some stuff that Simon Kinberg said he wanted to do with the movie, but like Fox shot him down every time. And like reading the stuff he wanted to do, I'm like, damn, that probably would have actually turned out better.
yeah, yeah, and just in hindsight, like if they knew they were being bought out, like they should have just canceled this movie. I don't know, we would have thought of like, oh, what could have been and whatever, but
Yeah.
hindsight's 2020, and it should have just ended at Apocalypse. So it's for a movie that I think shouldn't exist, like it deserves an F for me.
All right, Blake, close. That's our first F of this ranking so far. So close us out, Blake.
Well, then get ready for another one. So anyway,
All right, good night.
yeah. No, I mean,
Huh?
I want to be able to, add my own take and context too, but I almost second everything Michael just said. Like I understand where you're coming from, Donnie. In fact, it's kind of surreal. Like I feel like you're being too hard on a movie. So it's kind of weird to like be in this experience where I feel like you're being too soft on a movie, or at least like the first 2/3 of a movie.
It was bound
Um,
to happen, I guess.
yeah, and it's just like I understand what you're saying. How like it starts out like it's trying to go for a much more straightforward and serious approach, but like it just doesn't fit the three movies that come right before it. Like
I mean, my thing is, I feel like it's trying to tell a different story. Like, I get what you guys are saying about the mood and everything, especially when you compare it to what came before. But for a Dark Phoenix story, I think the mood is spot on.
it's just weird to think that this takes place not only in the same universe, not only in the same timeline, but with the exact same people that are in First Class and especially Apocalypse. Like, it's like what Michael said. Like we go from like the ending of Apocalypse is like a very uplifting ending almost because they not only avoided a dark future of robot overlords, they also avoid a literal apocalypse with an ancient evil god. But then when this movie opens, they're all still like depressed or like just in a bad mood,
I
and it's
think
just like
also a problem is, in timeline, this is 30 years after First Class, but nobody looks a day older.
yeah, I mean that's an issue that like just all the movies have now in retrospect. It's like so I guess
Yeah, like
part of the
they
mutant
should have they should have started aging him at least at the third movie.
Yeah.
like I guess part of the mutant X gene is that you don't age. I guess I mean like because Michael Fassbender definitely looks older compared to how he did in First Class, but
Yeah.
like still like who's the guy that plays Beast?
Nicholas
Um,
Holt.
he looks exactly the same.
Yeah.
Like it's like 30
Yeah.
years later. It's like damn boy, like give me your skincare routine.
James
Um,
McAvoy actually looks younger after he went bald.
yeah, which is actually funny.
Yeah.
Um,
It's like they should have at least gave Nicholas Holt like a couple wrinkles and like gave like Magneto gray hair.
Yeah.
yeah. Instead, they just randomly give him that patchy facial hair.
Yeah.
But anyway, since it is my turn, I complain about it being my turn, and then I'm about to invoke you, Donnie. One complaint you had about The Last Stand is there's a lot of moments where people are acting out of character. Woof. Like, fucking Hank McCoy is just totally ready to murder Jean Grey. Like, I'm sorry. What? Like, I thought that was like extremely out of character. Basically, like, how I feel about this movie is it commits almost every sin The Last Stand made, but it's worse. The only thing this movie does that is better than The Last Stand is that Cyclops is there the whole time. Like, Scott is along for the ride the whole time. But even then, it's like he's just kind of there. I mean, at least he is there, but he's just kind of there. And I mean, it feels like the budget was cut. And again, like, you can barely tell it's the 90s. This movie benches Quicksilver. Like, I feel like
Yeah.
this movie kept kicking itself in the nuts the whole time. Like, it benches one of the best additions and differences of this timeline is like the inclusion of Quicksilver. It's like, oh yeah, let's just have him get injured and he's not in the rest of the movie and he never gets to tell Magneto that he's his son. Which, yikes.
Yeah, that's that's one thing I forgot to mention with how, like, when I started like looking at how this movie fucked up itself, but then how it fucked up everything that came before it. There's just stuff they like picked up and never ran with. Like,
Yeah.
they go through all the trouble of having Charles reunite with Moira McTaggart in Apocalypse. She's not in this movie at all. They don't they don't tie up
Yeah.
Quicksilver being Magneto's son. Like, there's just a lot of plot threads they just don't pick up and run with. It straight up contradicts the ending of Days of Future Past.
Yeah.
Like I said, if you ever watch this movie, just turn it off before the final act and just be like, oh, they all died.
I'd say don't even watch it. I'm probably never gonna rewatch this movie. I'm just gonna try to keep telling myself that Apocalypse was the true ending. Um, I mean, I do understand the logic of why Simon Kinberg was here. Like, if they had to make this movie at all with these people as these characters, if they had to make a quote sequel to X-Men Apocalypse and Bryan Singer didn't come back, but I think this was because the muck around Bryan Singer was just so thick that like they couldn't avoid it or ignore it anymore. Um, I do understand the logic of Simon Kinberg, which is like, yes, he did. Let's just get The Last Stand out of the way. Yes, he did co-write The Last Stand, but he was one of two writers on The Last Stand. And not to encourage him throwing the other guy under the bus, but he is able to be like, hey, I only wrote half of it. So like he can kind of dodge that one. But with this one, like, he was a producer since First Class, and he co-wrote Days of Future Past and Apocalypse. And apparently, Bryan Singer started this habit, this trend, where he would like disappear from set and they didn't know where he was. Like, when he made Bohemian Rhapsody, if anybody actually remembers that he was technically the director of that movie because they never
Yeah.
mentioned it again, he would straight up disappear from set. And like it got to a point where the guy playing Freddie Mercury, Rami Malek, he wanted to like get in a fist fight with him because he was pissing him off so much. And apparently Oscar Isaac didn't get along with Bryan Singer a lot. So when Bryan Singer would like, I guess, fuck on off to his like trailer or his hotel room and do God knows what, like Simon Kinberg would step in and basically play substitute teacher. And he already knew these actors and they got along with them. And like Simon Kinberg seems like a good person. He seems like a nice guy. He doesn't seem like an asshole politically, judging by like what he posts and who's he's endorsed and on his Instagram. I know that doesn't make, a director, but still, he seems like a good soul. But he just was not the man for the job, I guess, even if the decision to have him be the one to take this over was somewhat logical, somewhat reasonable. I guess it worked better than getting another person that had nothing to do with any of these people ever before, like Brett Ratner. But yeah, I mean, it's just,
He just
and
got
like,
confused and fucked his dad.
but then like the aliens, amen to what Michael said. It's like, this is this is not only the fourth movie of this timeline, this is the last movie of a 20-year legacy of 10 films. And you're just randomly going to tell us that aliens exist in this universe? It's
Mm-hmm.
like, hold on, pause. Like, can we spend a couple more minutes on this shit? I will say, though, the introduction of the aliens is a rather effective scene. Like when Jessica Chastain, when her, I guess her shell, her flesh was human, she bumps into it in like the woods in the middle of the night, and then they like crash that dinner party or whatever, and you just hear all the dinner guests and friends like gasping in horror. And like I think that's effective. It just feels like it's from a whole other movie, not an X-Men movie. Like it
Mm-hmm.
feels like it's from a
Yeah,
sequel. It feels like it's from a sequel to M. Night Shyamalan's Signs.
yeah. Their alien forms remind me of the aliens and Signs.
Yeah. So again,
I
like
just want to. I just feel like I'm gonna see like Joaquin in the background. Vominos, children, vominos.
but yeah,
Like he sees Jessica Chastain walk by. Ah, ah.
so their introduction was effective. Like it was creepy. It was creepy when you first meet them. But then, like immediately, you have the thought, "Oh, there's aliens in this," and then they don't say who they are, why they're there. Well, I mean, they say our world died, and we need to harness this power. And they're evil aliens. They're mean. They don't give a shit what happens to humans. They don't care. They're like ants to them. And I'm like, oh Jesus Christ! You make them like the evil aliens in any other thing.
Yeah.
It's just like, are they the Shi'ar Empire? Like, it's just. And I guess what you said, Donnie, is like Simon Kinberg had other ideas to do. You'll have to send me what else he wanted to do. I didn't get to research that, but yeah, that was a big problem I was going to have with him. But I guess I'll have it with the studio. It's like this is the finale to your 20-year legacy, 19 to be exact, but still 10 films, almost 20 years, and this is how you're ending it. Like dare to dream, as you would say, Donnie. Like, and then they totally tease you with, oh yeah, in this movie, the X-Men go to space. They go a few miles outside the outer atmosphere in the prologue, and that's it. Like, fucking Jeff Bezos was in space longer than these guys. Um, and it's just like I thought, I thought they were gonna get teleported to like the massive super space station of an alien empire, and it was gonna be a giant breakout heist film. And I don't know, God, do that crystal thing from the cartoon, and that's why the Phoenix does her shit. Just it felt like the budget was cut. It felt like they weren't allowed to make it over 2 hours long, which I know it's weird for me to complain that a movie I already don't like is short instead of being longer. But it's like, you know, it suffers the opposite problem of The Last Stand, which is they shoehorn in the fact that it is the finale of a trilogy. In this case, they didn't understand the assignment. Like, yo, the clock's ticking, tick tock. You're never going to make another movie with these people in this timeline ever again. Like, this is the last time we'll get James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender, most likely. But it's like this is the end of not just the First Class sub-series, it's the entire 20th Century Fox legacy of X-Men, the first superhero franchise of the new millennium. And this is the page you end it on. This is the note you leave it on. It's an F. It's an F. I mean, I can go on and on for the rest of this hour, but I feel like I've made my point. It is the worst X-Men movie because it fails to understand that it is the last X-Men movie of these films, and that's disappointing. It's a bummer, it's a downer, it's moody. It's I need to shut up. So yeah, it's an F.
Which you were talking about the Shi'ar Empire a lot, like to give you, and I like one of the things Simon Kinberg wanted to do the Shi'ar Empire. He one of the things he said was if he had been allowed to, he would have done a 4-hour movie with the Hellfire Club and the Shi'ar Empire. And I mean, 4 hours, that's a tall order, but I think with all that stuff going on, it probably would have carried it.
And I think he also wanted to make it a two-parter like Infinity War and Endgame.
He did, because he said he wanted the first part to be all about like making the audience fall in love with Jean Grey, and then the second part was going to be quote unquote where she breaks your heart.
Yeah, and it's like, why? Like, I guess he wasn't the sole problem. I guess maybe he just had.
I mean, I still blame the aliens on him because like.
Then he should have cut him out entirely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not try to do like a watered down version of whatever.
Yeah, and it's like, 20th Century Fox, like, why didn't you want to go out with a bang? Like, why, why didn't you want to do like, an Endgame but for X-Men? Like,
so they want to sabotage their successor. Be like, yeah, try using your property after this stinker.
Yeah, I don't know. It's disappointing. It's disappointing because if they had made a hyper 1990s finale of the X-Men, that should have been the best X-Men movie ever. That shit should have slapped. And it just, he was given the ultimate mulligan, and he not only missed the ball, he pissed in the wind.
He fucked his dad.
He's going to hear this and be like, what is your problem with my dad?
I don't know. What's your problem? Why'd you fuck him?
Simon Kinberg, if you ever hear this, I'm sure you're a nice guy. Please hire me. I'm poor.
Just don't fuck me.
I
don't care how confused you are.
I mean, yeah, I don't mean to beat a dead horse. I don't mean to talk in circles, but I just wish we had a better ending for X-Men, a better finale. One last hurrah.
One last ride.
No, yeah. Instead of going for one last hurrah, it went out with a whimper. It was like a it was like a fart in the way out in church.
Like in Shawshank, he's gone like a fart in the wind.
Yeah, and but no, I agree with what Michael said, where it's like, don't even try to do the Dark Phoenix for a long time. I'm talking like the difference between Michael Keaton's first Batman movie and Robert Pattinson's Batman movie. Like, go that long without doing it. And I think Apocalypse did the Dark Phoenix well. It's like it referenced it. It was like, oh yeah, that's Jean's superpower that they need to get an edge on Apocalypse.
Mm-hmm.
I was fine with that. But then them doing her like no more Mrs. Nice Girl, like, yeah, she blows up.
And she blows up.
Like, what is that? And the last fight scene in this, the final battle where she takes Jessica Chastain up in space, that sucks.
Yeah.
Shit, like, oh god, like, that was the way I feel about this movie is the way you feel about The Last Jedi, Donnie. Or not The Last Jedi, the Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, let's I gave it a D, not an A+.
Yeah, and it's just like, how fitting that this movie, the ending of this movie, is just a literal train wreck. So that's where I leave it. I'm shutting up for real. If you guys have another comment or two, go ahead. I'm done.
Nah, I got nothing.
It fucking sucks dick.
Well, on that glorious articulated note. On that glorious and articulated note, that is our episode for tonight. And I gotta say, we're on more of a similar page than what I thought we would be. I thought there would be a lot more variations with the rankings for this episode. So that's neat. But that is our show for tonight. If you tuned in late, missed this episode, be sure to tune in tomorrow. The Spotify, Pandora, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts will be on all of that. Next episode, we will finally end this ranking. Part 3, we're ranking the 3 Wolverine solo movies, which, of course, X-Men Origins Wolverine, The Wolverine, and Logan. So be sure to check that episode out. Be sure to check our social media to find out when that episode will air. You can find us on all the social medias, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, at Fat Minute Radio. I'm Don John. You can find me at all those same social medias at Don John Laughs. And you can find my co-host Blake at BVJ. On that note, thank you. Fuck you. Good night.
Simon Kinberg, I'm broke. Hire